Arcade exclusives.
Hello and welcome to the first arcade exclusives video I've made in a while, where we look at some games that never left the arcade and hopefully recommend a few gems for you to check out on MAME. This time we're looking at some of Taito's offerings. Wow, Taito made a lot of arcade games over the years. The list is quite staggering actually, and they made some absolute classics, didn't they? Legendary Taito arcade games include Space Invaders in 1978, which is one of the most important arcade games of its era. Elevator Action 1983, Bubble Bobble and Arkanoid in 1986, Double Dragon and Operation Wolf in 1987, Chase HQ 1988. The list goes on and is too big to mention all their games in this intro. I'm sure you all have your own personal favourites too. Making this video has made me realise just how many Taito arcade games I loved as a kid in the 80s. I played Double Dragon and Operation Wolf to death at the arcades. Operation Wolf was at my local cinema and it never failed to suck me in. Arkanoid I played a lot on the BBC Micro, and Bubble Bobble and Chase HQ on the Amiga. All these games I've mentioned were ported to just about every home computer and console you can think of back in those days. Space Invaders must be on countless platforms. But what about all the Taito arcade games that were never ported? The arcade exclusives. There were a lot. Well, let's have a look at 10 of them. Aqua Jack, also known as Aqua Jack, is a 3D shooter released by Taito in 1989 for their Z System arcade hardware, on which Chase HQ and SCI ran, among others. For want of a better comparison, it's not dissimilar to Space Harrier or Burning Force, played from a third-person perspective, but in this you're on a hovercraft, so you can't move freely around the screen, you're fixed at the bottom. You control the hovercraft's movements and also shoot at the same time using the mounted gun. Buttons are shoot, jump, which strangely your hovercraft can do spontaneously, and a button for missiles, which are available in a limited number. All you need to do is shoot oncoming enemies, which are both land and air enemies, like tanks, planes and helicopters, and bosses are also variations of these. Levels are very busy with a lot going on screen and in the background, but mostly in a good way. Quite a cool game actually, and surprising it wasn't ported. Graphics are decent enough for 1989 and the music and sound effects are okay, although unmemorable. Balloon Bomber is a very early one from 1980, only 2 years after Taito created the world's most famous fixed screen shooter Space Invaders, and interestingly this game was devised by the creator of Space Invaders, Tomohiro Nishikado. It's a very simple game. You control a gun platform at the bottom of the screen, shooting these balloons which drop bombs on you from above. If a bomb hits the ground, it creates an impassable crater, so the more bombs hit the ground, the less your gun platform is able to move left and right. This restricts your ability to evade subsequent bombs, eventually trapping you in place. The balloons are delivered by a plane, and that plane occasionally starts dropping bombs on you as well. Being such an early arcade game, the music is extremely primitive with sound effects typical of the era. That music increases in speed as you destroy balloons, as does their movement speed. The more you shoot, the faster they get. After you defeat a wave of balloons, a new wave is placed by the plane, lower and lower each time. The hit radius of your platform is quite harsh, so even a nearby bomb that looks like it may just miss you will destroy you, losing a life. You can of course shoot the incoming bombs, and the game awards extra points for doing so. Each shot balloon is worth 100 points. I'd say this is one for fixed screen shooter aficionados only. It's fun, but I can also see why it was never ported. Although it never had a standalone home release, Balloon Bomber was included on the PS2 version of Taito Legends 2. Chase HQ 2 is by far the most recent game on this list, being released in 2007. Not to be confused with SCI or Special Criminal Investigation, which had the subtitle Chase HQ 2. Considering the original Chase HQ and SCI were released in 1988 and 89 respectively, Chase HQ 2 is a quantum leap in graphical fidelity, being released 18 years later. The visuals may be vastly updated, but the premise remains the same. You're chasing down criminals in your car, ramming them in order to cause their vehicle enough damage to arrest them. Simple premise, but as anyone who's ever played a game in the Chase HQ series knows, that doesn't mean it's easy. The city is full of obstacles and other road users which you'll need to avoid in order to keep up with your quarry. Several shortcuts are present in the city streets which you can use to your advantage if you know where to look. Shortcuts take you through pedestrian walkways and shopping arcades, which is fun. Nitros are available collected along the route. Each level is introduced with an FMV dispatcher giving you your assignment, which is a Western woman dubbed in Japanese, and after each arrest you get a little animation. The game has 3 different cars for you to drive: a traditional American police car, a muscle car and a sports car, each having a choice of 3 colours. Your target vehicle is clearly marked with a flashing target text above the vehicle. If you can't see your target, there's also a distance indicator on the right of the screen, while a meter on the left shows their damage. This is pure super fast arcade racing action, just really good simple fun. A shame that due to its late release, not as many people played this as its predecessors. Dead Connection is sort of a run and gun, I suppose, released in 1992, and I say suppose because it's quite original, so I'm reluctant to pigeonhole this to a specific genre. This game has so much style, I love it. The theme is sort of 50s gangster vibes with Tommy guns and everyone is wearing suits and hats. They clearly drew inspiration from several films here. The very cool track mode intro starts with the words Taito Film Presents and features a guy who looks like Vito Corleone from The Godfather. And the in-game characters could be straight out of Dick Tracy or The Untouchables. But bizarrely, Dead Connection is set in 1953, not in the 1930s Prohibition era as you might assume. As I said, the attract mode is very cool and immediately brings in some great music, and the whole game has some really cool music actually. This game is really unique and I do urge you to play this one. I've never played anything quite like it. Each stage takes place in a fixed one-screen location. The levels are quite beautifully drawn pixel art and look wonderful. There are 8 stages in all, and each one brings a smile to your face if you're someone who appreciates pixel art. You play as one of 4 characters, shooting your gun in all directions to clear the screen of bad guys. The scenery is interactive with enemies and shot objects dropping power-ups which award health, points and weapon upgrades such as a shotgun or Tommy gun. At the start of each level it informs you how many enemies you'll have to kill before progressing. At the end you get a boss or several bosses which are much tougher than the other baddies. It works in the same way as Time Pilot does if you've played that. At the bottom left of the screen a meter shows you how many enemies you have left to kill on the level. At the end of this are the boss characters. You can move your character anywhere you like on the screen, which is really what makes it so unique. Similar games would have your character fixed along the bottom of the screen for example, but here you can go absolutely anywhere that the layout allows. This of course allows you to get up close and personal with enemies and you'll pistol whip them if close enough. Between the levels you get a bit of story progression and Taito really keep up that cinematic vibe established in the intro. Your 4 guys are chasing after a mob boss called Narozia, responsible for the killing of a young woman. He's the Don Corleone lookalike we saw earlier. Your guys pursue him across the 8 stages, arresting and interrogating his cronies for information along the way. As arcade games go, it really goes for it with the plot. There's also a little twist at the end, so I won't spoil that for you if you get that far. Previously an arcade exclusive, Dead Connection was released under the Arcade Archives by Hamster Corporation earlier this year on Switch and PS4, so you can play it that way as well as on MAME. But it never saw a dedicated home port, which in my opinion is a crying shame because Dead Connection has a lot going for it. Air Inferno, released in 1990, is a spin-off from the Landing series of games, the first being Midnight Landing in 1987. This runs on Taito's Air System arcade hardware, which supported only 2 games, Air Inferno and its predecessor 1988's Top Landing, the second game in the Landing series. The cab is a sit-down with a flight joystick and came as both static and motion simulator options. It's a rescue helicopter simulator using 3D polygonal graphics. The heads-up display shows several of your helicopter's instruments, including an altimeter, your speed, wind speed, a compass and distance from target. The game features some English, like the text Heriport on the on-screen instructions at times. Aside from the joystick, which is used to control the helicopter, you also have a button for shooting a jet of water used for extinguishing fires. The aim of the missions is to put out any fires and reach the heliport, sometimes rescuing civilians. The polygonal graphics are quite cool in that late 80s early 90s style, reminiscent of 3D DOS games of the era, but I find Air Inferno quite hard to control on MAME. Gunbuster, known as Operation Gunbuster in North America, is a weird mix of on-rail shooter and first-person shooter. Considering it was released in 1992, that's pretty crazy, as Wolfenstein 3D came out that year, a year before Doom. The idea is you use a gun and a joystick. The gun shoots, but also moves you left and right in 3D space, while the joystick controls your forward and backward and side-to-side movement. In other words, you move forward and backward with the joystick, strafe with the joystick, and turn and shoot with the gun. If it sounds fiddly, it is. It doesn't work very well, or at least it didn't using my Sinden light gun in tandem with an arcade joystick. The cabinets featured 4 sets of controls, each with a gun and joystick, split into 2 teams of 2, each team having its own monitor. Being 1992, it's quite early 3D, so it doesn't look great now, but may have impressed back in the day. Well, the graphics I mean, the sense of 3D space and depth is actually pretty great for its day. It has loads of scenery that scales with proximity, and a lot of it can be used as cover. Although it doesn't work very well on MAME, I'd imagine the actual arcade cabinets worked a bit better. And the game is very short too. Although it's a bit of a failed experiment of an arcade game, there's something admirable about the attempt. Double Axle is, like Aqua Jack, another Z system game released in 1991. Known as Power Wheels in Japan, it's a monster truck racing game. Seemingly the 2 versions do have several differences. At the start you're offered 3 options for races of varying difficulty, and the difficulty does ramp up quite significantly. The 3 race options are cross country, mud bog and icy road, which are ranked beginner, standard and expert respectively. The 4th option is a demolition derby crushing event. In this you have to destroy as many obstacles as possible and beat your opponent. Obstacles are cars to be crushed or other stuff like signs and barrels and so on. The first round takes place in an arena which is nice and organised and legal, with obstacles placed for you to destroy. But the next round progresses to the highway where you throw legality out the window. Here you're straight up ploughing into oncoming traffic and crushing the cars of people foolish enough to park at the side of the road. Races take place in various locales, including snowy terrain, a desert, beach and city. The harder races have hazards to avoid which make them much trickier to navigate, and also have branching paths, with each path presenting different obstacles to tackle. Some hazards like cliffs will cause quite a delay as you're placed back on the track, but small obstacles like trees and rocks will just slow you down slightly. Before each race you can spend your winnings on upgrades or nitros to use in the next race, similar to Super Off-Road. Obviously the better you place in races, the more prize money you'll be awarded. There seems to be 2 different versions of this game, with one version of Double Axle being like its Japanese counterpart, Power Wheels. They have varying on-screen displays. In the original version the display shows you your times per lap at the top right, your time remaining to reach the next checkpoint at the top middle, and you also have a map of the track. At the bottom is your speed and number of nitros remaining. The updated version shows speedos at the bottom left, an indicator showing your position on the right side instead of the lap times and map, and shows your position at the top middle. This is much better as it lets you know how you're actually doing during the race. I also noticed that the race select menus differ in the 2 versions, with one showing all on screen in a grid and one showing them side by side. The single player upright cabinet is not dissimilar to Super Off-Road either, having a wheel, and there's a dual screen sit down version as well. I'd imagine the wheel makes this game a lot more enjoyable. It works fine with a joystick in MAME, but I'd imagine a wheel is easier to control. Once you get to grips with the feel of the driving with a stick, it's quite satisfying, but actually it's the menus that are the hardest to navigate without a wheel. I find it very difficult to select some of the races on the select screen. Double Axle isn't anything to write home about in terms of gameplay, but actually I really like the graphics, particularly the character portraits. Kaiser Knuckle, also known as Global Champion in North America, is very clearly Taito's attempt at a Street Fighter II knockoff. Released in 1994 on Taito's F3 system 32-bit arcade hardware, it pretty much follows the conventions established by Street Fighter II. It has the same 6-button layout, fights are the best of 3, and has characters with both quarter circle Hadouken style moves and charging style moves. One character, Kazuya, even has a fireball move that sounds almost exactly like a Hadouken. It has a roster of 9 playable characters from all around the world, as well as 3 bosses. The characters are a mix of unoriginal and quite unique fighters. A favourite is Lisa, an Amazonian fighter. I love her character design, and she comes to the fights partnered with a tropical bird and a monkey, the latter of which proves very dangerous in a fight. Taking damage fills up a power meter at each side of the screen. A full power meter means that the next successful special move will be extra effective, causing bonus electricity or fire damage. This adds a welcome bit of rubber banding to fights. The graphics are really nice actually, some good background detail going on in the stages. Some of the music is quite out there, like a weird funky jazz fusion, but it grows on you. Kaiser Knuckle is no Street Fighter 2, that's for sure, but it's certainly not one of the worst clones I've seen from that post Street Fighter 2 era. An update to Kaiser Knuckle called Dan Kuga was planned but never emerged until 2022 when it featured on the Taito eGrip Mini 2. This is Kaiser Knuckle's only home release. Under Fire is a light gun shooter released in 1994, Taito's attempt at a Lethal Enforcers style game which was released by Konami 2 years prior. This also used digitised photographs to create its semi-realistic graphics. Played 1 or 2 players, you play as part of a special police unit armed with submachine guns brought in to rid the city of a gang of thugs that the regular police have proven unable to handle. Interestingly, the cabinets didn't use traditional light gun technology, instead using infrared. This meant that the game didn't need to use the flashes of light present and necessary in other light gun shooters. Its guns also featured force feedback. The game's music is very subtle and quiet, so the game is rather dominated by sound effects. I find this one pretty hard because there's a lot going on. You have loads of enemies, then you have your fellow police which you must avoid shooting, then a ton of civilians you have to keep alive, then worse still you have bad guys disguised as civilians which you have to shoot. So I find it quite difficult not to just blow away a ton of innocents in this game. But it works well with the Sinden light gun in MAME if you want to have a go. It's okay, but I wouldn't say it adds anything to the genre. Superman was released in 1988. It's an action game incorporating both beat 'em up and scrolling shooter elements. Beat 'em up levels involve Superman basically punching and kicking waves of enemies, and shooter sections are typical scrolling shooter fare. You get bosses at the end of each level, usually some form of super strength alien, which makes sense as you're Superman. But some bosses are less believable, like an attack helicopter. Surely those bullets are doing nothing to Superman, come on. Sometimes the screen scrolls with you as you move, like in these street levels. You can walk or fly at any time you like here, and some levels automatically scroll either horizontally or vertically. There's a button for punch and one for kick, with up on the joystick making Superman fly in the beat 'em up sections. Holding down punch and releasing performs a projectile attack, which can kill a number of enemies at once if lined up. Rather than individual levels being in a particular style, the levels are split into sections of varying gameplay styles. First you get a beat 'em up bit, then a vertically scrolling beat 'em up bit where he's flying, then a scrolling shooter section. During the latter, Superman can use his heat vision in place of kicking, which can be used to destroy what I assume are asteroids. It can be played 2-player co-op, with the second player also controlling Superman, just palette swapped. Destroyed scenery sometimes drops crystals of various colours, which restore health or destroy all enemies on screen. Health is shown at the bottom left, consisting of 5 hit points. Some enemies are more powerful than others, so a hit from one enemy may deal more or less damage than another. By far the best things about this game are the graphics and sound, which are both exceptional for 1988. The graphics are really vibrant and detailed and drawn well, and the music actually used John Williams' Superman score, and not just the main theme either. Otherwise the game is unfortunately quite repetitive and therefore dull. So that was 10 of Taito's arcade exclusives. What did you think of these, and have you played any of them? Let me know in the comments. I quite enjoyed this as I get to discover and play new arcade games myself, so there might be some more episodes in the series soon. Thanks for watching.